I am continuing in my reading. What I'm doing in this series is to read through the entire standard works of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This consists of the Bible, the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants, and the Pearl of Great Price. I am continuing reading in a chronological order, according to event, not according to publication or volume, so I'm skipping around a bit as I move along. We are continuing in the Gospels. We have read Christ's crucifixion, death, and burial, and then his resurrection. The women find the tomb empty. They tell the apostles. Peter and John witness the empty tomb. Then we have the appearances of Christ, first to Mary Magdalene, then to the other women. We have the conspiracy of the Jews to conceal his resurrection, but we also have the resurrection of all the saints. All those who had died before Christ, who were worthy of a celestial glory, have been resurrected. We continue this now. We're going to pick this up both in Mark and Luke, though Mark is going to be very short. This will be our third appearance of Christ. In this video, we have a Joseph Smith translation. And what the Joseph Smith translation is, this is a translation or correction done by Joseph Smith to restore those passages that have been lost or corrupted over the years. So we read it now in Mark chapter 16, verses 12 and 13. After that he appeared in another form unto two of them, as they walked, and went into the country. And they went and told it unto the residue, neither believed they them. Very brief, very short, not much to say about it here in Mark. He appeared to two as they traveled into the country. Doesn't say where they're going, doesn't say who they were. But they go and tell everybody, and nobody believes them either. Nobody believes that Christ is resurrected. Nobody understands what that even means. And when people come and say, hey, we saw the resurrected Christ, everybody else says, what are you talking about? Now keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. Nobody believes yet, except those who have actually seen. Now, there is no Joseph Smith translation for either of these two verses in Mark. So let us turn to Luke, and we'll read a much more in-depth account here. Luke chapter 24, verses 13 through 35. And behold, two of them went that same day to a village called Emmaus, which was from Jerusalem about 80 furlongs. And they talked together of all these things which had happened. And it came to pass that while they communed together and reasoned, Jesus himself drew near and went with them. But their eyes were holden, that they should not know him. And he said unto them, What manner of communications are these that ye have one to another, as ye walk and are sad? And the one of them, whose name was Cleopas, answering said unto him, Art thou only a stranger in Jerusalem, and hast not known the things which are come to pass there in these days? And he said unto them, What things? And they said unto him, Concerning Jesus of Nazareth, which was a prophet mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, and how the chief priests and our rulers delivered him to be condemned to death and have crucified him. But we trusted that it had been he which should have redeemed Israel. And beside all this, today is the third day since these things were done. Yea, and certain women also of our company made us astonished, which were early at the sepulchre. And when they found not his body, they came, saying that they had also seen a vision of angels, which said that he was alive. And certain of them which were with us went to the sepulchre, and found it even so as the women had said, but him they saw not. So it says that Emmaus is about 80 furlongs. Now a score is 20, and a furlong is 1/8 of a mile. So 80 is 60. We divide that by 8, and we get about 7.5 miles from Jerusalem. Most likely somewhat to the west of Jerusalem. Now we are told, we have the two disciples, just like Mark told us, but we're given the name of one of them is Cleopas. Now the only other mention of Cleopas in the Bible that I can find is in John, where it's listing all the women who were there at the crucifixion, weeping. One of them is listed as Mary, the wife of Cleopas. No clue who Cleopas is, but it's most likely Mary's husband. Or one of the Mary's husbands, because there's like 10 Marys. But notice this, they're going out to the country. Christ just kind of joins with them. And they're all talking about it. The women have already told them about the empty tomb, and Peter has gone to the empty tomb. This might be, might not have heard about Christ appearing to Mary Magdalene and the other women at this point. They may have already been on the road and missed that news. But they at least heard of the empty tomb. And they're talking about it. Christ comes up, and I think Christ was probably standing somewhat behind them, talking to them. But they don't notice who he is. And it says their eyes were holden, meaning that the Spirit actually restrained their understanding. They couldn't recognize him. It was a suggestion to their mind that kind of clouded their mind so that they didn't recognize Christ. And Christ asked them what they're all sad about. What's all this that you're talking about? And they're like, haven't you heard? This is big news all over Jerusalem. The trial of Christ, the execution of Christ, all of that was big news. The whole city was in commotion over this. And it's been only 3 days. Where have you been to not know about what's going on? And he gives them a rundown of all the current events, including the testimony of the women and of Peter and John about the empty tomb. But they also mentioned that, again, we thought this was the one that would deliver Israel, would redeem Israel. Again, they're still thinking of Christ as a political leader that was going to shake off the yoke of Rome and establish a new kingdom of David. And they're still confused. They don't understand. So now let us continue. Verse 25. Then he said unto them, O fools, and slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Ought not Christ to have suffered these things, and to enter into his glory? And beginning at Moses and all the prophets, he expounded unto them in all the scriptures the things concerning himself. And they drew nigh unto the village whither they went. And he made as though he would have gone further, but they constrained him, saying, Abide with us, for it is toward evening, and the day is far spent. And he went in to tarry with them. And it came to pass, as he sat at meat with them, he took bread, and blessed it, and brake, and gave it to them. And their eyes were opened, and they knew him, and he vanished out of their sight. And they said one to another, Did not our heart burn within us, while he talked with us by the way, and while he opened to us the scriptures? And they rose up the same hour, and returned to Jerusalem, and found the 11 gathered together, and them that were with them, saying, The Lord is risen indeed, and hath appeared to Simon. And they told what things were done in the way, and how he was known of them in breaking of bread. It is fun when you read these tiny little snippets that hint at further information that we are not given in the scriptures. At the end there, hath appeared to Simon. Let us look at this again. This is all on the same day. Christ was resurrected in the morning. It says Mary Magdalene first comes to the tomb when it is still somewhat dark. They meet the angels. The women go tell them, the apostles, Peter and John, come. Now, it's a couple of miles, so you're probably even at running, you're a half hour to get to the tomb from where the apostles are. The women probably take a little over an hour. They go out there. Say they get there, still a little dark, probably around 5:30. By the time they get back to tell the apostles, it's 6:30. Peter and John make it to the tomb between 7 and 7:30, sometime in there. Mary Magdalene is visited by Christ around, say, 8. The rest of the women see Christ sometime between 8 and 9. The guards make their report sometime that morning, probably around between 9 and 10. We get all this going. Now, if they're walking 7 miles, that's about a easily 2 to 3 hour walk for your average person. And these guys aren't hustling. They're walking, they're talking, they're going at a nice leisurely pace, probably a 3 hour walk. So they leave Jerusalem, say, around noon. They would get there. I mean, it says that the twilight's already coming on, actually, so they probably left a little afternoon. They probably stayed, they had their lunch, they got all the news. The women come in, Mary Magdalene comes in telling about, well, they may not have heard about the resurrected Christ, but it's a 3 hour walk. They're going to get there, say, around 4. It says the evening's coming on, the time is far spent. The next stop is too far away, you won't get there until after dark. Christ stays. It says during this whole walk, again, they're probably walking slowly, maybe even taking them like 4 hours. Especially with Christ teaching them, they're probably not going too fast. So maybe they're not getting there until 5 o'clock, maybe a little after. Christ opens the scriptures to them. They recognize him when he breaks bread, almost as if he is giving them the sacrament again. And now they recognize him, and immediately they turn around, they go back to Jerusalem, another 3 hours back. This time they're probably going a little faster. So say they sat down to meet about 5 o'clock. Christ leaves, they recognize him, they head back to Jerusalem, and it takes them 2.5, 3 hours. They're getting there close to 8 o'clock. They get there, all the apostles are all gathered in the room, and when they get there, before they can tell their news, before they can say that they saw Christ, what do they hear? The people there welcome them in and say, come and listen. Peter saw Christ. Simon. Remember, his name is Simon Bar-Jonah. He is called Peter, meaning stone, or in the Hebrew, Cephas. That is a name or title given to him by Christ, but his name is Simon. And so they come in and they are told that Peter saw Christ. And then they say, well, we saw him too. So now we have Mary Magdalene saw Christ. The women saw Christ. The 2 disciples on the road to Emmaus and Peter have all seen Christ. I want a story about Peter's encounter with Christ. I want to know what happened. We're not told that in the scriptures. We're just told that he appeared to Simon. He appeared to Peter. So we actually have now 4 appearances of Christ up to this point. But also note that when they were listening to Christ, what did they say? Did not our hearts burn within us? They could, even though they didn't recognize him, they felt the Spirit. The Holy Spirit was communicating to them, testifying of Christ's words. Now, we will take a moment and look at the Joseph Smith translation here for Luke. In 16, it now reads, "But their eyes were holden or covered, that they could not know him." So again, a spiritual veil was placed over them so they couldn't recognize him. Verse 17, "And he said unto them, What manner of communications are these which you have one with another, as ye walk and are sad?" Minor clarifications. In verse 18, we remove 2 words here. So it's now "and one of them" instead of "and the one." And then instead of "art thou only a stranger," it is just "art thou a stranger." Unnecessary words removed. In verse 19, "which was a prophet" is corrected to "who was a prophet." Verse 21, we now have "he who should have redeemed Israel, and besides all this." So minor corrections. Verse 22, change "which" to "who." Verse 23, change "which" to "who." Verse 24, we correct "which" to "who." We also, however, in verse 24, take out "it." So it's now "and found, even so as the women had said." In verse 28, "further" is corrected to "farther." In verse 30, instead of "blessed it" is just "and blessed." In 31, instead of "he vanished," it is "he was taken up." Much better way of putting it. In verse 32, "did not our heart," pluralized, "and not our hearts." In verse 33, we have "found the 11 gathered together, and those who were with them." Minor correction. Verse 35 now states, "And they told what things they saw and heard in the way, and how he was known to them in breaking of bread." Again, mainly just minor grammatical corrections and clarifications. I do like some of them, instead of being "vanished," it is "he was taken up." But other than that, no real new information here. So we're going to leave that here, and we are going to be reading about his next appearance next. So I will see you there.